Can we experiment with something for a minute? When I say that what's happening is like, well, what we said in the other video. Here's the thing, right? I mean, we've all encountered people who, particularly from the baby boom generation, but downwards a bit, but certainly that but certainly like when people of my age and younger don't perceive in such a way, but like that the way they're perceiving, the way they've been psychologically programmed to misperceive these things about issues that are not, political, philosophical in nature, but are rather actually boring. But they program them this way, and it's having a disastrous effect where the parties have to behave irrationally in order to satisfy the sort of psychological needs of this population. But much of which is this baby boom, the baby boom, who does read in there. See, they read in their magazines and newspapers and op-ed pieces in newspapers which describe what's taking place when budgetary issues and such have come up, throughout the years that I've been alive. That there's a sort of media system. There's been a print media system and magazines and newspapers and such that have helped both the two parties brand each other by building in language. The language of the publications describes a philosophical divide between the two parties. Everything we said, an ideological divide, and the people have gotten like sort of particularly the baby boom generation, like that generation has sort of perceives, because of the language they're given is not specific, but it's maybe why it's part of why it works. They're hostile to each other. They think there's a philosophical issue at stake about things like the budget, right? But I mean, why did the guy jump off the bridge? Like what? I mean, the guys with he left. The whole point was he left his political office, jumped off the bridge to his death. Wife comes out, says to the press, "This was the most important political statement of my husband's life. The most important political act of my husband's life." He was responding to the morning communication put out by, well, in that case, by, well, see, to call it one, I mean, those are interlocking networks of like think tanks that have been trying to know what to do about the baby boom generation and this sort of the university system. They've sort of indulged in this media they read and what it's done to this thing. So it was a message that said the baby boom generation must now, we said before, must come in an objective reality. But the only way they could would be to kill themselves. What is at stake in the psychology of people, say, older than I? Why is it that the parties have to behave irrationally to satisfy this thing that's been created where people split and perceive they're having a political, philosophical, that they're divided, that the country's divided along political, philosophical lines about something like the budget. And it's gotten to the point where they're so distorted that the parties just meet in secret. They may not be doing anything. I mean, they may just be waiting. And it's finally they've decided the only thing to do would be to behave irrationally, and maybe they'll come into reality. But here's the thing: why won't they be able to? These people that read the print media, it's this thing to call it propaganda. It's a type of programming that's just been going on for so long that you do meet people older, like lawyers and doctors and people in their 50s and such who perceive that when the budgets and budgetary issues of the government and that kind of boring thing, perceive there's a philosophical debate in the country. I wonder if what we read before is part of why they can't be. The only thing the parties can do is behave irrationally, where all kinds of people are being harmed because they have no choice but to behave irrationally because the population demands this type of behavior. Right. What would happen? Right. Why did he kill himself? Why did that guy kill himself to make a statement about this older generation and this way they've been programmed? Right. What would happen if they found out that's unreal, that they don't have a political philosophy, that they and the other people they went to college with and had their culture war and this, that they don't have a philosophical political divide between them, that they don't have philosophies. That's not what's happening. They've been sort of manipulated that way so the parties could brand themselves, but it's distorted them. Like their egos are out of control. They perceive they have a sort of political philosophy about things like the budget. Right. What would happen if they found out? Right. It's that thing we read before. Right. What would happen? Why do the parties now have to behave irrationally? Like they cut veterans' benefits, they're taking away food stamps and everything, and all kinds of government assistance. People are going to be out on the street. The other party is sort of acting like they want to harm the poor and the veterans. Why do they have to do it? Maybe they're trying to push the population into seeing that something unreal's been happening in their mind. There isn't a philosophical debate. The parties aren't that different, and the budget itself is a very boring thing, and they've been programmed in order to brand the parties, and it has gotten out of hand. Right. What would happen? Right. It's that thing we read before. The steps what would happen? Right. They'd have to accept. Right. This world they live in, that there's a philosophical. Right. The first thing they'd have to accept, the liberals and then the conservatives, all the people with their thing, right. First they'd have to accept, it's what we read before. My thoughts do not mean anything. That's the first, that would be one thing they'd become aware of, like, a whole part of my thoughts don't mean anything, because that's what they've been arguing about and writing and getting angry and reading op-eds. So, right, the first would be the realization, my thoughts do not mean anything. Right. What would come next? Right. Well then, right, my meaningless thoughts are showing me a meaningless world. You mean that's not real? That was a branding technique? Wait, my thoughts about this don't mean anything? My meaningless thoughts are showing me now a meaningless world. I'm upset. I'm upset because I now see a meaningless world. They've had an identity for so long that they're in a philosophical debate.